It is the last day of 2024. This video won't come out until 2025, but still, Happy New Year. This is an artificial rock with an artificial forest on it. And I created this, I think, 2 years ago, also over Christmas. And at the time, these Christmas trees, they were very cheap. I put them together, but I also made this rock. Now it is time to have a little reflective session. I forgot to unwire it. Well, actually, I was lazy. I didn't feel like unwiring it. So I'll need to unwire it. I'm going to prune it. I'm going to remove the weeds. And then I'm going to do something else, which is really interesting. I have a whole bunch of these piceas that I also styled a year or 2 years ago. I left the wire on. It is biting in. It needs to come off. It needs to be pruned. But I'm going to add these to this forest. Now, if you are wondering, I like this rock, I like this forest, I want to make it myself, then I have a few videos on it. At the end of this video I'll link through to part 1 and 2 of this video. But, very short, I'm going to explain you how I did it. How did I make this? These trees, they are sitting on an artificial rock. I made it by taking a piece of steel, I bent it in the shape of this rock, basically just a U, folded around and another U. So it is just the shape. Then I added a metal mesh. I added a metal mesh to it, and the metal mesh subsequently I covered with glue. What glue? Well, glue for laying tiles outside on concrete. It's flexible, it is weatherproof, and I used different colors. I used brown, black, grey and white, and I mixed it in different combinations so you get these nice shading. And I put the cement on in multiple sittings. That way you get a somewhat natural looking rock. Then over winter I also shaped all these little trees. I removed most of the roots, and in very early spring, as the roots were starting to swell, as the buds were starting to swell, that's when I planted the whole thing together and I fixed it in place. Now the birds were eating all the substrate and all the moss, so I've added this plastic mesh over it. Now I need to get this netting off, otherwise you can't work the tree. But fortunately for me, there's no birds in here. So let's get this uncovered, trying to not pull any branches off. I really hooked it well around all the cement, so it is sitting in place quite tightly. There we go. Now I'm not going to be using all that many tools for this work. I've got a normal knife, yin pliers to create dead wood, a normal concave cutter. What else do I have here? A little wire cutter. Don't drop it, it will break. A large wire cutter. General purpose scissors. And pliers. Pliers? Tweezers. Now, first thing I need to do is remove all these weeds that have popped up. I'm going to do this very carefully because the moss I want to use. So later on I'm going to remove the moss from the places where I'm going to plant new trees. Then I'm going to just gently prune back every single tree. I'm going to thin it out. I'm going to see whether there's still wire on it. I'm going to remove it where possible and leave it where I can't get it off. If the wire is buried so deep in the bark that I need to damage the bark to get it out, I'm just going to let it be. Over the years it will get covered by bark. It will just grow over it and then you won't see it anymore. I just need to be more careful when I work on this tree. Then I might have to rewire some of these branches, and then I can start planting the new trees on there. Downside of all these weeds is of course that it completely ruins the effect of scale. Next to that, in summer when it really gets warm, they pull so much water out of the soil that the plants itself that the trees won't get enough water anymore. So I really need to get them out, and ideally get them out with all the roots without disturbing the substrate. This is actually tree root coming from all the way there. Always interesting how much weed is in one of those. Now what I'm going to have to do is go through each and every one of these trees and look at the individual branches. Now this is not all that healthy. This is in the shade, so the branches are turning a little bit brown. I can remove the brown parts until the first buds. But more importantly are these sort of branches. They have grown up And in fact, I don't want upward growing branches. I could wire them horizontal, but at this point that's not very useful because I want, because then I need to wire everything again. I want to, from now on, try to do as much as possible just a clip and grow regimen. This will have as a benefit that the branches grow naturally in the shape that I want to have them. So that reduces the need for wire, but it also increases the stability of the branching. These spruces have the natural habit of coming back up after removing the wire, which is also one of the reasons why I didn't want to remove the wires initially. Now they do backbud quite well, so I can go quite steep with my pruning. Now what I'm after are these sort of branches. They've all come up, they've grown up from a base branch. And there's a tiny little bud still at the base, and I can just prune these out, leaving these little horizontal branches in place. These horizontal branches is what I really want to keep. And I'm removing these whole clusters of branches that are new. So this now creates a natural patch that stays in shape by itself. I still haven't looked for the wire. There is still a wire on there. I can leave it on or I can remove it. But I need to thin these out that they open up a little bit. That really is aiding in giving you a sense of skill. This is one that I'm going to wire out because I want to keep all of it. But most of these branches I'm just going to be thinning out, removing growth right at the base that comes up, and favoring horizontal branches and horizontal buds. Now with the whole thing pruned, I can check. There's a little bit of wire on this branch that can still quite easily be taken off. So I'll do that. And then I'll probably rewire this branch later on, but in the opposite direction. This is going to be a very lengthy process, and I'm not going to show you the whole tree, how I do this. I'm just going to show you now the example, and then I'm just going to do it for the whole forest. Here as well, there's a tiny little wire holding this branch in place. But I know that with spruce, just keeping a wire on for a season is not going to be sufficient. Even 2 seasons is not a lot. So don't start working with Christmas trees if you don't like wiring, because you will need to rewire every year, every 2 years to get everything set in place and stable. These big ones, of course, I can't unwire. I need to clip them and then take them off. Now this section has been completely pruned out. Here the wire could stay on. There the wire could stay on. These 2 other ones have been unwired, and what you see here is branches that really do need a wire. These 2. So I'm going to wire these 2 out. And I might take a look at this and this branch to also wire out. This I hope will stay in place. This I hope will stay in place. And here at the top I'm going to clean up this cut a little bit, because now it really is a sharp cut. And I need to clean that out so it becomes a gradual transition over time. Points like these that are often vilified by people just starting out with bonsai, because they say all these chops, it is ugly. And yes, these chops are ugly. But what you do is you over time reduce these chops. So you allow this bark to grow over again. And by just making this a little bit more smooth, either the bark grows over or it becomes fairly invisible because it gets covered over with hars. It gets covered over with sap. Now this is still a young plant, so I have very good hope that it will cover it by itself completely. There we go. Naturally, if it doesn't, I can then pull this dead section down into the trunk a little bit, so it looks like a naturally died off section of the trunk. But it's these little details that are important to create a scalable tree. Similar to these little lumps. Last year I left them in place. Now I remove them so that over time this becomes more and more just a smooth old trunk with a bit of scarring, of course. Now for wire I'm using copper wire, and I'm winding it around the trunk in the opposing direction from what it was winded before, so that any scars that are on the trunk still are smoothened out a little bit, or at least are not enforced. So I'm going around the trunk at least once, ideally twice, and then just wire the branch. Now I see already I've taken too short a piece of wire. That was a little bit silly, but this is what happens, right? Now it is not a big issue, because the wire might also be on the thin side for this upper branch. So I can wire a second branch with this. So I can wire a second branch and use the long part here to wire it, and the base has thicker wire because it's doubled up, and the end only has singular wire, and I have another branch anchored. So in a way, all's well that ends well. And of course you can say these are all excuses, and they are, but in the end it works, and that is important. And now of course we can just put these branches in a fairly low angle. And fill this space nicely. I think that's pretty good. This still though needs a little bit of wire. Maybe a lot thinner. So this whole section is now pretty much done, and now it's a matter of doing this there as well. I do realize that if you look at it, it looks really bare at the moment. This is going to go into a lot of sun for the rest of winter. I'm going to fertilize it lightly, and I hope that there's going to be plenty of backbudding here on these old branches, so that I get inner green growing. But if I just leave these branches so long and just let them grow, eventually the whole inside will die out and I just have a big green mass with no inner green. So this is part of the process. You just need to thin it out and prune it back at least once a year, otherwise you can't retain this as a bonsai. After all, a tree is open, it has space, there's airflow in between it, and it's not just a closed canopy, particularly not when it is on a hillside like this that is not optimal ground conditions. Right, all pruned, mostly wired. Let's take a look at this. This I completely wired out and I chucked it in a corner, and I just basically forgot about it. It was just sitting there, and you can see the lower branches, they're not doing all that well. So I'm now going to take it out of the pot. I'm going to prune everything back. I am going to remove most of the branches, prune back the top, and then I'm going to place it right there in the middle. Now there's still a lot of wire here on the tree. I'm going to remove all of that as well. On the branches that I'm not going to keep, of course. The branches that I am going to keep, I'm just going to leave the wire on, because the wire is actually not bothering me all that much. It's not biting in yet, so it can remain in place. One of the reasons why this tree is doing so poorly is because it fell out of the pot twice, and next to that it was standing in the corner of my yard without any sun, being wet, not fitted in the pot properly. Yeah, basically just cared for it poorly. The problem with planting it in this thing is that the root ball needs to be very, very shallow. So I'm trying to scratch as much substrate out as I can to then place it on top of this planting. And I'm going to remove quite a few roots. So it's going to be interesting to see how this responds in springtime. Now the difficult part, of course, is getting it in here. I have removed the moss here. I've tried to scratch away some of the substrate, but there's not a lot of substrate. And I found two tiny little wires, which I use to wire the trees into place. Because that is the big challenge, right? I have this now here. I have a lot of substrate removed. And I look at it. This is a fairly bare side of the tree. So it would fit in here. Lower trunk, bare. And the branches just fanning out towards the outside. The whole composition becomes a lot taller now, but how do I now fix this in place? And there is no real answer, to be honest. So I could take this tiny little piece of wire and try to connect more wire to it, but I doubt that will be successful. So I'm just going to plant this in here, put it in place roughly like I want it. Then I'll take this one wire, loop it around this big root, just for a slight connection, and then I think I'm just going to hold it in place with wires to the rock and to the other trees. Those are fairly stable now. Then I'll fill this up with light substrate and add moss over it. I might just actually have to put one wire all the way around the rock for the year so it can start growing into place. Let's see what I can manage here. Tighten this, and now I can gently squeeze it around the other trees, and this way it will be held in place just for the time being. Now I want it to go forward. This is the back of the planting, so something like this would actually be pretty good. Now I'm not going to squeeze it all that tightly. It is of course not real rock, it is cement. Just enough to hold this here. Just like this. And then I'll have to find a connection somewhere here to hold it a little bit upwards. Just like this. Is how I want it. And it really doesn't have all that much, it doesn't have to hold all this much, right? So it is just temporary. Now normally I would use keto, which is a Japanese peat, to hold the substrate over the roots in place. But I don't have any keto at the moment, I think. No, I don't. So I'm just going to have to work this in here. Add substrate with a lot of organics and then cover it up with moss. So here on top the roots are lightly covered. It's a real shame that I don't have any keto, because that is really sticky and will hold it in place a lot better than what I'm doing here. This is really not a great example of how to do this. But in the end it is about keeping the roots humid and in place, so that in springtime when they start growing they can go grow into the substrate below it. And once that is all set, then it doesn't need a lot of support anymore. Now this is why I wanted to keep the moss that I've removed from the substrate, because now this can just hold it in place for the time being. This of course is not very stable, so I'm going to have to protect it from the wind wherever possible. I guess it's now ready again to go for another season. It's a lot taller and I will have to put the net on, because this really is now very, very vulnerable. I do hope it lives. There is no guarantee, but I do think it will, because I didn't do anything too drastic. It is now going to go into a little bit of sun. As you can see, I've put a little support beam here, so that really this tree, it is so secure in place, it can't move anywhere. Now it's just giving it time and letting it go. Will grow again over the season. At some point I will have to look at rewiring all of these trees so they come together better. This one might need to come forward a little bit. But yeah, that's for next time. And in May, of course, this tree has now started to grow. You see the big tree is doing quite well. But for the rest, I really need to weed. There's lots of weeds in there. So let's remove the net and start pulling out these weeds. This is something that needs to be done continuously. The net is of course there to stop the birds from digging in the moss. And then I can prune it back again. Pruning in spring, when you got 1 to 2 inches, so maybe 3 to 5 centimeters of extension, really triggers a backbudding response. And here it is of course important to prune the top of these trees much more than the bottom of the trees. Keep in mind, the top of the trees, not the top of the composition. The bottom I might just remove just the growing tip, where in the top I might remove 2/3 of the sprout. And that way, hopefully in a few weeks, we'll see a new flush occurring further inside the tree. The big tree I'm going to prune very little, because the big tree is not fully established yet. You see there's a few little buds here, but it's not really strong. It was a weak tree when I put it in place to begin with, and then all the work that I did to it, not beneficial to a healthy regrowth. So there I just need to be patient and wait for it to start growing, and the rest of the forest I can just give a gentle plucking. And of course, cleanup done. Try to get this covered up again. Probably won't fit in more because the trees have grown. This is sort of work that needs to be done once, twice a year. This pruning, once a year. The cleanup, every 2 years. If you don't have any pesky birds, then you'll probably be okay without the net on it, and it will look a lot better. But this is how I need to keep it. On the other hand, you could also say, great that I have so many birds here. But once they start digging for moss and insects in the soil, they do become a little bit of a pain. But I'm quite happy where this is going. Now this tree needs of course to really get growing, get the roots into this rock, so this summer it's important to really never ever let it dry out. And after that I hope that slowly there are so many roots that the birds can't do too much damage, that I can again have it without a net over it. But last year they dug up so much, yeah. But this is coming now. I think in half a year to a year it will be quite full. Then I can start pruning these long branches back again, unwire the rest of the tree, rewire maybe in winter. But this video is done for now. I'm going to do another update maybe in a year or two. For now, this was how I maintain this forest. If you want to know how I created this rock, have a look at this video. If you want to look at the full planting of this tree or of this forest, look over there. See you next time. Keep growing bonsai. This was Jelle.